Coming to you from Studio HQ, welcome to a new episode, well, the very first episode of Think Indie podcast. This is a podcast, talk about comics, everything independent, indie, wherever be web, what have you. We're going to be talking about it. I am Dodgy in the mix, mixing up with Manny from Truthful Comics. Say hello.
Hello.
And we've got Paul Rabbit Gomez. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm ready to get going.
Excellent, like we all are. So, again, this is a new show all about comics. And if you're listening to us through your podcast platform, welcome. And if you're watching us, you can see that. So, guys, okay, so I want to go around the board and I want to introduce Manny. Going to pull up the little slide here. Tell us a bit about yourself. How'd you get into comics?
Well, I've been a fan of drawing and since I was little. I actually when I graduated high school, I went to the Joe Kubert School of Cartoon and Graphic Arts in New Jersey. And I studied under Mike Barron with I was there with Adam Kubert and all the big wigs.
Wow.
Yeah, and I went there for a short time, and then I decided to come back to Puerto Rico, make my first comic. And after that bug bit me at the making comics thing, I started. I was like, yeah, this is it. This is for me. So yeah, that's what I did.
Okay, and you went to Puerto Rico, and were these the comics that you made in Puerto Rico?
No, these comics I made it here in Virginia. Actually, when I came back to Virginia, I got together with a friend of mine. He lives in New York, Alvaro Cortez, and the concept is mine. And I got in touch with him. He's a writer, and I'm the idea guy. So I gave him the ideas. He fleshed out the script, and then I do all the artwork. And my good friend Francisco Rivera, he does the coloring. And yeah, and right now we have three. Yeah, right now we have 3 comics done, and we'll see what happens. We'll keep making them.
Okay. And just for those who are listening, what is the name of your comic?
The title is Project New Wave. That's the title of the book. Yeah, it's about it's a group of superpowered young people, teenagers, and they're put together by the military. They're put together to fight like aliens and all this stuff that the army cannot deal with, because they all obviously have superpowers. But what the team thinks they're doing the right thing, fighting for the U.S. or whatever, but there's actually a lot of dark stuff that's going behind the scenes that they eventually start finding out, and then they're caught in the conundrum: do we continue doing the right thing, quote unquote, or do we just get away from them and then become traitors of the United States, basically? So that's what they're caught between a rock and a hard place.
And where can people find your books?
They can find them through our website, www.truthfulcomics.com. They're on Indie Planet right now. They're available on indieplanet.com. And yeah, so yeah.
And tell us, what was your first comic? That
got
you hooked.
Well, they got me hooked. I think it was probably Spawn #1.
Nice.
I think that was the comic that I was like, yeah, I need to do this for a living. But I've been comics since I was a kid. Archie and all kinds of stuff.
Nice. All right, Rabbit. I'm moving on to you now. So tell us a bit about yourself and how you got into comics.
So I'm pretty new at this. I think I've been in the comic industry in about 3-4 months. And whenever the pandemic hit, and I started writing stories with my kids to kind of keep the morale up, because we were all locked in the house, and I was going to make a comic for my kids to kind of show them the progression and to keep them all together. And I ended up talking to an artist at a local comic shop, and I decided that I was going to make it to a standard that I could put it on a comic shelf, and that's how I started it.
Wow.
Fantastic. Wow, that's
cool.
Amazing. And
that's cool.
I know that you have something that's already out in Kickstarter. Tell us a bit about that.
All right, so this is actually my third comic that's on Kickstarter. This is my fourth a project that's been on Kickstarter. I had one that repeated, not only on its standalone, but it was in an anthology with brand new writers as well. This is being my third book out. It's called Cryptic Haze, and it's right on Kickstarter right now. It's an homage, if you will, to Batman's The Killing Joke. And I tell people that it's a unique version of Monkey's Paw through my eyes, if you would.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And then tell us a bit about the previous books that you've done.
The one that came out right before that was Bushibu Circus Mysteries, and if you could tell with the name, Bushibu Circus Mysteries is a little bit more playful. This is actually the book that me and my kids were just sitting around in a room like a think tank, and we came out with 20 ideas, and this was the one that really kind of connected with everybody. So whenever I decided to start making comics, this was the first one that I started writing the script with. I started learning how to pick artists and utilize cover art, and just went from there.
Nice.
That's cool.
And then tell us about PTSD.
So PTSD was a personal project of mine. I was working on Bushibu Circus whenever things started stalling with some of my artists, including the interiors. I had a few drop out. So I decided to go ahead and start with the second project, which was PTSD. And it was really, not just about people in the service, but, anyone who had any mental health, that if you needed to talk to someone, please get help, because we all have to deal with things. And everybody needs help from time to time. So this was really a personal project of mine that I wanted to get out there and just kind of open up that conversation.
No, that's amazing. I really appreciate that, because it is a topic that kind of gets tight-lipped at times. So I really appreciate you bringing a book out like this.
Thank you.
Rabbit, I really do. I really appreciate it. Let me ask you the same question I asked Manny. What was your very first comic that you got?
Well, the first one that I bought was an X-Men. It was, man, I think I was 12 or 13. It was an X-Men annual, and it really opened up my eyes to that team and that acceptance of people who were kind of pushed out from the majority. And my favorite character was, for the longest time, was Bishop. And he was in the annual. He was like one of the last stories, but it kind of hooked me. I had to get his first appearance and everything after that.
No, he was an amazing character. I remember seeing him for the first time. Wills Patachio and Jim Lee drawing him was just the greatest gift ever.
Yes, sir.
And that hair, like, I don't know how many people could actually rock that hair, but damn, he did.
The mullet.
Yeah, that was a mullet on steroids. That mullet had superpowers. All right. So we're moving on to this next segment now. I've got to ask you guys a question from a creative standpoint. So my question to you is, how did it feel when you held your first printed comic book in your hand? Manny, I'll start with you. How did that feel?
Surreal. It felt surreal, man. It's crazy because as you come up with the idea and you work on it for so long, the creative process behind a comic book is so tedious. Say it takes such a long time, and I'm drawing it and inking it, so I see the process over and over, and I see these pages over and over. But it's a different when everything comes together and you actually have a comic book in your hands, man. It's like watching your baby for the first time. It's coming, but when you see right, it's coming. But when you actually hold it in your hands, you're like, oh my God, this is real. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing with a comic book. I knew what it was gonna be like. I knew what it was, but it's a feeling that it's unexplainable, man. It's so rewarding.
How about you, Rabbit? What did it feel when you had your first printed book for the first time?
And it's kind of hard to answer that question, because there were two real big moments in my life around that type of question. I first put out an ash can, and I don't know if everyone knows what an ash can is.
Oh yeah.
And it was basically an advertisement about both of my books. So this came out first, and it's like a mini comic book. When it
Right.
came to my door and my kids pulled it out, because they opened up the box and my kids pulled it out, and
Yeah.
seeing my kids' eyes just widen. And I remember my oldest, he looked at me and he held it up while he was reading it and was like, "Dad, can I take this to school?" And it was like my heart just dropped. It was one of the most amazing moments in my life. It really was.
Congratulations, man. That's the thing, right? As a fan, you go to the comic book store and you just pick up a comic book. You don't realize how
Right.
important it is if you went in and found something that was yours, right? Something that you had involvement in. That's
Yeah.
something that a lot of people don't take for that they take for granted. And I really wanted to hear that because it's one thing about making a comic, but it's actually when you have it in your hands. But I
Yeah.
mean, I just want to ask you a couple of questions. So one is, did you have any challenges with releasing it or getting it on time? Start with you, Manny.
Yes. Especially this right now, my third one.
Yeah.
The first the one on number two, it was pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
Finish it, send it to the printer, bring it back. Right now, my book has been in the printer since December,
Oof.
and right now the order is still on hold, and they can't even tell me when the book is gonna be ready. So
Mhm.
it's so frustrating
No, I could
because
imagine.
it's not in my control. I did everything
Mhm.
I had to do, and it's a waiting game now. It is
Yeah.
frustrating.
No, definitely. How about you, Rabbit?
I gotta say again, with the first book, it seemed like it went fine. I did have less covers because I had 3 covers on that one. I think the main hurdle for me for my second book, which is the last one that really came out, Bushibu, it had 7 covers if you count the blank one, and
Hmm.
I got most of them, but I'm still waiting on 1 or 2. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of it really depends, but sometimes it is difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And how do you guys cope with that? Is it just a matter of sort of thinking like, did you plan it? Did you plan for this, or is it just something that you just have to deal with when it
It,
comes to?
there's no way to plan for it because it's
Yeah.
like, for example, right now is my job was done, and
Yeah.
I sent it to the printer with plenty time. And it's the paper shortage right now. So
Hmm.
basically they told me flat out, well, there's a paper shortage right now, and we don't know when we're gonna be able to print them. So
Yeah. That's
it's just
annoying.
not in my hands. It would suck more if it was like a Kickstarter or something like that fans are
Yeah.
expecting it. Mine
Hmm.
is, yeah, I'm selling it on my own, so when I'm losing money, I guess, because I can't sell it.
Yeah.
But it's not like people are like already paid for it and they're waiting. What I'm saying? Like, it's
Hmm.
just I'm losing out, and it is what it is. I have to bite the bullet.
Yeah. No, that's annoying. And you, Rabbit?
So yeah, I mean it was so much easier with the first one, and how I went about it is I thought I was going to get it all done in a month. So
Hmm.
I should have listened to everybody around me because they all told me at least put 2 to 4 months kind of an expectancy time. I
Yeah.
did fulfill that first one within a month, which was shocking to just about everybody, including me. But the second one, it's it's at the 2 month mark right now, and I think I have about half the orders that still are waiting.
Hmm.
And how I deal with it is simply, I talk to them whenever you're on an indie platform or a platform like Kickstarter. You can send messages and updates and tell them, "Hey, I'm waiting on this cover." Like one of them that I'm waiting on is the blank, and I tell them, "If you ordered a blank, your shipment's being a little delayed." And most of the
Yeah.
time, they're okay with that because they're used to Kickstarters and they are used to the delays. As long as you keep the communication going.
Of course.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great advice. Great advice. But what would you recommend if someone's going out there now thinking, I want to make my own comic book? What sort of time frame would you like recommend in terms from being the book finished to when it actually gets published? What sort of time frame would you recommend?
Um, man, time frame is difficult. I would say the way that if I'm gonna give advice to somebody, I would give them the advice I have for everything in life. Like, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. Don't ever expect that the printer is gonna send you the comics on time. Don't ever expect them. You give yourself enough time, a few months maybe, um, to have those books in your possession, because if you cut it too close to the date, is man, so there's always something that happens. So yeah, don't put yourself in that position.
And
No,
there's
of
a lot of
course.
things. There's a lot of things that you don't expect, and especially if you're a first time, like you don't expect to send it in and then wait to get the proof back, which is basically the first printing to make sure all the lines are straight,
Hmm.
and then you have to wait for them to get the okay and then start printing. So I would tell any newcomer out there, talk to your printers before you get a timeline, and then add a few months after that.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
fair
So
enough. That sounds good. All
Yeah,
right, guys. Thank you for that. And yeah, if you are planning, just plan ahead. Just as Manny said, aim for plan for the worst.
yeah.
All right, so we're going to be moving on now to some reviews. So we're going to be reviewing a webtoon book. And if you guys are not familiar with webtoon, they are an online sort of like streaming service, but for comic books. And a lot of them
Hmm.
you don't pay for, but there are revenue created for the actual creators, as far as I know. But the book that we'll be talking about today is Space Boy. It's created by Stephen McCraney. Currently at this stage, they're at 293 episodes. They were at 291 when we started the show, or started the idea of the show. So each week they have been creating new pages. But all right, I just want to ask you guys, especially you, Manny, what did you think of the artwork in
Man,
Space Boy?
I really dug the artwork. It's it's very inviting, very colorful, rich. It looks like everything is painted.
Mhm.
And most of all, I love the format. It would completely caught me off guard, how the pages and how the layouts work, the way the creator made them work.
Mhm.
It I was not expecting that, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and Manny, I was going to ask you, have you read a webtoon book before you jumped on this one?
No, I've never actually read webtoon before.
And how did it
Um,
feel when you jumped in this for the first time?
if if caught me it caught me by surprise. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting the way the format is. You basically scrolling down, but the way he laid out the panels,
yeah.
man,
Hmm.
it's an experience. It's almost like it's animated.
Yeah.
It's not a cut and dry panel. No, it's nothing like that. It's
Hmm.
almost animated in the way that he made it.
Yeah, definitely. How about you, Rabbit? So, in terms of the writing style, how did you find it?
I thought it was really good. I mean, it seemed to flow very well, and the way he just kind of put it into perspective again with whenever those panels, the uniqueness that he did it with it read extremely well the way he placed
Yeah,
everything. So I
Mm.
mean, it
yeah,
really did read really smooth.
Yeah, I
yeah,
must admit, because I suggested for you guys to read 5 episodes, but I read 5 episodes in like 10 minutes because I
Yeah,
didn't realize I was going so far and so far ahead because it's such an easy read. It's
yeah,
a very smooth flowing. It goes from comic book style to almost like just you know art with writing on it,
yeah.
in the background. But how about you, Rabbit? Was this your first time reading a webtoon book?
No, this wasn't my first time. I think I've read
Okay.
about 10 or 20 before. I will say that this one was a little bit more unique than the most of them that I have read. Some of them
Hmm.
are more just triangle panel based, where this one did have a unique styling to where whenever it scrolled down, you were looking to your left, then you were looking to your right, then you were looking
yep,
at the full frame. And that's what made this one so interesting and unique, and the way he placed everything, and especially the words, did make
Mm.
it just seem smooth. It looked more like a kaleidoscope that you were reading
yep.
with
Yeah,
with
true.
the art just kind of shaking around, and but it was so inviting.
Oh my,
No,
yeah, that's the word. That's the word. Yep,
Yeah.
inviting.
Yeah. And I mean, do you think this would fit a comic book format? Do you think this would be good in that style?
Man, I don't know. I don't know how it will work in a traditional comic book. I guess I would have to see, but honestly, I doubt it would work as good as it works here. Because here is it's almost like it's almost like you cannot stop reading. You keep going
Mm,
and keep going. In a page, is I think when you pass the page, it completely breaks down the what he's trying to do in the website. Is you're
yeah.
going so smoothly, and it drives your eyes throughout the whole image. As
Mm-hmm.
you pass a page, I don't think it will work the same.
Mm. How
I
about
think
you, Rabbit?
with the traditional books, I don't think it would work unless you adapted to it. There's this book called Echo Lens that's out right now, and it's sideways formats. Now, if they were to
Yes.
utilize what Echo Lens did and then merged it with this, it would be a possibility. But in the normal format, I don't think it would fit.
No, it's
Ah,
difficult.
fair enough. Yeah. But I mean, I do love it. And look, if you were to look at this panel alone, it looks like something that just came out of a comic book. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like there are some pages, like from the previous page to this current page, are completely different.
Yeah.
So I think with McCraney, he's got a lot more flexibility in his style. Like he's
Yeah.
so adaptable. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, we see panels that are just look like they just came out of a comic book.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just so yeah, it's very creative.
It is.
And yeah, no, definitely. I look if this is your style, definitely like in terms of art style, I would. And if you've got a story in your brain that you just want to bring out uh,
It's a good.
spontaneously, then obviously webtoon is it for you. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. No doubt.
All right, we're going to be moving on to our book review, so our floppy review. And this book that we're going to be reviewing today is The Script Rebellion by Morgan Quaid. Art and cover by Elisa Menigel. Letters by Morgan Quaid as well. Publisher as well as managing partner Harry Marcos and editor-in-chief Ian Sharman. So this is about a hapless clerk who dreams his way into a dream city called Rust, where he builds a new life and falls in love and everything else. It is quite a spin out, if I can say that. But man, I want to hear from you. The art style in this book. How did you find this? The Script Rebellion.
Well, the artwork to me, it was very Mike Mignola. Um,
Yes.
Mhm.
so yeah, and it's funny because for the longest time, I could never get into Mike Mignola's work. And in the beginning, I saw it as he was being lazy. It was only through studying art and actually doing more art, and I learned to appreciate it. And this was the same. This has a lot of Mike Mignola in it, and I absolutely I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
The layouts are insane. They're not.
Yeah.
They have traditional paneling, but there's also when he goes into the dream world that yeah, it's a treat to read it for sure.
Yeah. How about you, Rabbit? With the writing style, it was quite a unique ride. How did you find this?
Yeah, unique was definitely the word for it. Some of the time it was nice short bursts of dialogue, and then it was a little bit longer. It definitely had the feel that if you were looking for a full spectrum of different types of dialogues, then this is the one for you. I love the paneling, just like he was saying. There's some panels in here that were circular, and it's just like you don't see too many circular panels. So whenever
Yeah,
you get that,
No.
add the dialogue, and it's just refreshing that there's something different.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and there were some panels that were like, like textless, and then the very next panel was loaded with text. Almost
Yeah.
had that Frank Miller Dark Knight feel.
Yeah.
The Dark Knight
Yeah,
Return. You had
yeah,
some panels loaded with text, and some of them were just multiple text with like just different subtle movements, and it absolutely works. But you know, that's a lot of work for the artist, though. Like, he must be so busy. Like, look at the detail on each panel. The detail is just miraculous.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even though there's heavy ink in there, but even still, that's a lot of work. That'll take so much time.
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah, but no,
It's
but I mean, yeah,
it's funny how they I'm sorry. It's funny how the main character, this little scrawny calligrapher,
Mm.
I identified a lot with him in the sense that he when they describe him, he's very much into a routine. Like he says you can set your time by the time he goes to work,
yeah,
because he's like everybody every time he like every day he's on time. And it's funny because I've met throughout my life, I met a lot of people, obviously, and a lot of people don't like to have a routine. I'm a creature of habit.
Yeah.
I have to have a routine to work. I don't like to work in different places. I want to go to work to one place the same way, wake up at the same time every day. So I was like, man, this guy, personality wise, he's not like me. Obviously I'm not as subtle and calm as him, but the routine, I'm just like that. I was like, man, that's crazy.
mm. But like, would you what sort of genre would you recommend this to for people who are looking to read a comic book? That and you know what would you recommend for them about the Script Rebellion?
I don't know if it would be horror so much. I would say it would be more dramatic. I mean, it did have that splice and page of whenever they were talking about his arms and stuff changing into that aspect. But I mean, to me, it really wasn't horror. It was more the feel of the character and his love interest and the story behind it. So I really would say it would be more dramatic than anything else.
Suspense, yeah. If you again, if you like Hellboy or if you like BPRD, it's right on that ballpark. It's a little bit of horror. It's more mystery. It's
A little bit,
more
yeah,
suspense.
yeah,
They throw a lot of curveballs at you, because when you start reading, you see when he goes to Rust, which is the city, the down parts, you think that those people are the villains. How they treat him, how they receive him, and the guy, the gunslinger, the handcuff guy.
yeah.
You're thinking the whole time these
Crazy.
guys are gonna betray him. They're the bad guys, and they're actually the good guys. And it's a curve I wasn't expecting. I was like, man, they're gonna kill him. They're gonna do something to him.
Mm.
It was interesting. It was a fun read. It's
Yeah.
not it's not a, it's not a it's not a 5 minute read. Obviously, you have to
Yeah.
sit down for it. But
No, you really do. It actually is very, very wordy as well, but in a good way.
in a good way, yes.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can see that a lot of heavy inking I find, but again, it works. It really does tell the story.
Yeah, for sure. And I think they do it on purpose, because he's like they made it a clear choice, because of he's a calligrapher. He's working with inks,
Yeah.
so it's very you know what I'm saying. And the his girl, the one that he falls in love with, she's like some sort of I don't know, powerful being or something like that, because she's using
Mhm.
the ink powers or whatever. And I think
Mhm.
they did it on purpose. They put heavy inks, and it kind of it's part of the personality of the story.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so me moving on now. So this is a topic I've wanted to discuss for a long, long time. Um, what's up with Archie? Is Archie indie or not indie? And I want to leave this up to you guys because if you think about it, right, the character's been around since the 1940s, since 1941. He actually first appeared in Pep Comics number 22, which was a superhero title. And you think about it, the superhero title was overtaken by this ginger fella. I mean, look, I want to ask you, Manny. You mentioned before that you're a fan of Archie. What does Archie mean to you?
Man, Archie is the indie publisher. Um,
You think
Archie
so?
to yeah, for sure. Archie to me is what indie publishers should strive to become.
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't consider Archie indie because they're very successful. They've been um,
Yeah.
publishing books forever.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually work with DC. They work with Marvel. They work with Kiss and different people. But if you notice that Archie, whenever they, like, let's say the Punisher and Archie, when they did that
Mm-hmm.
trade or that crossover,
Yeah.
Archie never changed their characters. Punisher
Right.
had to change to be part of Archie. The
Yeah.
same
To
the
a
same with
degree. Yeah.
the same with Kiss. They came to Archie and they had to adjust to the way Archie tells stories. So
Mm-hmm.
they don't compromise. There is
No.
Archie is the way they are, and if you want to do something with us, it's our way, or we just keep doing our own thing.
Yeah, and I mean the house style's been going on since probably the 1950s. How about
Yeah.
you, Rabbit? Were you a fan of Archie?
So I am. Whenever I first heard this question, and I answered it to myself. Well, I don't know who Archie is because if they're talking about someone who's indie, then it's not the Archie I know. Because this Archie has been around for like ever. How could they not?
Yeah,
How could they be indie? They
yeah.
have this whole corporate thing about them that like you said, everyone had to change to be in their world.
Mm-hmm.
That's what corporate basically is like you have yourself established, and that's what makes you more corporate. And Archie has
Hmm.
been that forever. So how I don't understand how they could be indie, but I mean I could give that to you on the fence.
Yeah,
I'm just saying they so known and so established, and they have their guidelines, and that's what corporate is.
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. Like, I'll just have my 2 cents because we talk about the big two, and then we talk indie. So if Archie is not indie, then where does Archie land if we talk about the big two? Because we talk about DC and Marvel, and like that's just my question.
Well, I mean, they've been established for a lot longer than just about any other company. Yeah,
True.
people overlook them, but that doesn't mean
Yeah.
that they're not corporate. I mean, because like I said, they've outlasted so many, or they lasted so much longer than anyone else, other than the big two. Then, I
Yeah.
mean, how can you call them just indie?
So
True.
okay, so my question is do you stop being indie if you're successful?
Well, it's not that. I mean, let's look at Image. I mean, because
Mhm.
Image is the largest indie, really, because you could take just about any comic. They don't have those guidelines that Archie does, and that's what sets Archie apart. Whenever you're talking about Archie, you really have to go in there and ask permission or set to their rules. Whereas Image, their rules are that it is open. So
Yeah.
whenever you're talking about indie's more open to all these mass ideas. So that's what I think makes you corporate is that you have all those strict guidelines. Just because they're not as successful as the big two doesn't mean they're not corporate.
Hmm. Yeah,
That's a
that's a
good
valid point.
argument. That's actually a really good
No,
argument.
yeah, that's a valid point. The way I see it is Archie's house style is almost like if you come in. Let me see how can I explain this. If you're coming to draw Savage Dragon, for example,
Right.
Eric Larson hires you to draw Savage Dragon. You have to draw it in a way that he approves it. You
Yes.
Yeah.
can't you can't just go and do Archie Savage Dragon because he's gonna be like this is not gonna work.
But
This is
but that effect is you're going to the creator of Savage Dragon, and Image
Yeah.
has like hundreds of creators. So
true.
they're all those creators have different guidelines. Archie's one thing, it's like you got Archie and Sabrina and all these other stuff. And they've also made all these shows and
Yeah.
how do you just pin them as a independent? That's what
But
I want to know.
but let me say this. They came out with that Afterlife with Archie, and Francisco Francavilla did the artwork, and it was completely different, and it was a horror book.
But didn't he have to go to them and make sure that what he was doing was okay?
Yeah,
Probably, yeah, I'm sure,
Yeah.
but they allowed it. The same thing with the Shield that Rob Liefeld was gonna
Right.
revamp. He did the first one, and he got out of it or whatever, but it's completely different. So I think they're embracing that a little bit, like letting other creators do their own thing in their universe.
But
But
it's their universe.
but they're keeping
Yeah.
their main Archie Andrews, whatever. You cannot mess with him too.
Right.
No, definitely cannot mess with Archie Andrews.
No, but
even though he doesn't look imposing, but
no,
the ramifications will be
but
enormous.
I just bought a Betty and Veronica trade paperback last. It was, I think it was last week, and it was Adam Hughes did the artwork, and he wrote it and did the artwork, and that thing is beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's in, yeah, man, beautiful, and it's Adam Hughes.
I mean, Archie's been overlooked for a long time, but there's no doubt about it. It's an established company. I mean, to say it's an indie, it's kind of a far stretch for me. With
Yeah.
Image, they have such an umbrella that they can call most of their stuff indie. Whenever you talk about like one specific thing like Savage Dragon that's more established, but it's still under that indie umbrella.
Yeah, I think it's hard to tell. It's hard to say because I've a couple days ago I shared something on the Buy Indie Comics Day page of Tom McFarlane, this new comic that he came out with, and somebody wrote to me, "This is Buy Indie Comics Day, and you're sharing something from Tom McFarlane, like the richest comic book creator there is."
Right.
And I like basically he told me he's not indie, and I'm like, so he's successful, he's not indie. I don't get it.
Yeah.
But I guess every person, see it different. I guess it is what
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
it's hard to tell. But I do get what you're saying, that they have like a house style, and it's like a company.
Yeah.
You have a valid point.
And look, and one thing about Archie as well. Did you know that their band hit the top 100 billboards in 1969 with Sugar Sugar?
Yeah.
Oh God, I did not know that.
That's a true story. A fictional band hit number one.
That's crazy.
Top 100.
And they used to.
It's a great song too. It actually is a really good song.
Yeah.
And they actually animated the actual band performing as well. It's amazing. You got to watch it on YouTube. It's hilarious. But
that's crazy.
It's actually pretty good. But definitely, and look, and they were groundbreaking as well because they also introduced Kevin Keller in 2010,
right?
Who was the first gay character.
Yeah.
And look, and I think they're trying to make Veronica more Latina. I'm not sure if she was always a Latina character.
I don't think
so. Oh yeah, no, I didn't know.
Yeah, because I kind of see that in the Riverdale series, like they do that a lot. But then again, they made Reggie. He looks either Eurasian or Asian.
Asian, yeah. I see,
yeah. But he's tough as nails, and I kind of like that. He's not being like the the guy in the corner being a dick. Like he's actually He's a tough dude.
Yeah, that.
He gave Archie a black eye. So definitely, the Riverdale TV series, the first season was good until they started killing off some of my favorite characters. I was like, no, I can't do this.
Spoiler alert!
Yeah, sorry, spoiler alert.
See, there you go.
Years ago. Yeah, from 4 years ago. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of the new or the all new Archie?
Oh man, that looks really good.
It looks
it's
different.
written by Mark Waid.
Yeah, and who did the artwork? Was it Samney?
I try to remember. I think no, it wasn't Sarah Piccielli. It was someone else.
Oh man, that looks really good.
They actually had big name artists on it as well. I think Piccielli did the some covers. She was the co-creator of Miles Morales.
Miles Morales, yeah.
But definitely, yeah, it actually got some good reviews from this one, even though it was going this more realistic route. But
yeah,
kind of has that Saved by the Bell feel to it to a certain degree.
Yeah, it looks really good.
All right, we're gonna wait for Edgar to jump on. Here he is, just in time. Just in time.
Hey guys.
Edgar,
Hey, how's it
how are
going?
you?
What's happening, man?
Hey, I'm good. I'm good. I was enjoying the conversation about Archie and whether or not they're indie.
Yeah, and you're an Archie fan yourself?
Well, I can't say that I'm a huge fan. I've definitely read some of the stories, and I'm familiar. Obviously, it's difficult not to be familiar with Archie, with as many years as they have behind them, and all of the media that you guys were talking about, the WB show.
Of course.
So yeah, I mean, to that respect, yes, but I've never like really gone into like, read a whole series or a whole thing of them,
Right.
No problem. So Edgar, tell us a bit about yourself. How did you get into making comics?
Well, I mean, as a kid, that was always the dream, because that was like, the ultimate drawing job, right? It was like, oh, you make your own comic book, like like all the big guys. And for me, I always liked just drawing in general, but there came a time when I ended up at a comic book convention, and I ended up like, my eyes were just wide open, and I collected comic books for the sake of copying them, right? I was emulating these amazing artists and these pieces, and that's really what drove me into it, was the fact that there was so much beautiful art out there,
Of course.
and I wanted to be a part of that, right? So that's what drew me in, man, the art. I think everybody can say the same, right?
Yeah. For me, that's what it is.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us about Amerikaiju.
Yeah, so Amerikaiju is a comic book that I created, kind of in a very long, roundabout way. I came up with the name first as a response to a comment, and then after coming up with the name, I was basically, I got hooked on drawing monsters. But it was specifically American monsters. So like mythical things, like things like the Jersey Devil, Momo, Bigfoot, Chupacabras in my case. I was drawing all of those guys for practice, because I started going on social media, and I was I really wanted to do something for myself, and I wanted to draw something that that nobody else was drawing. Everybody was doing, here's Spider-Man doing this, and here's Captain America doing that, right? And for me, I was like, okay, I can do that, but what do I personally get out of it? I know that I can draw them, I know that I can go to that route, but what is it that I get out of it? So I started drawing these monsters, and very few people were drawing Chupacabras or Momo, that kind of thing. So I found a little niche for myself in to that respect, and from there the pandemic hit, and like everybody out there was, there was this big shock of, you have so much more time on your hands. I don't have to commute to and from work, you don't have to do a lot of these things. So I took that time, and at the time it was like perfect storm. My son had just turned 5. There were lessons at home that needed to be taught, and I ended up teaching him some of those lessons through the stories that I would tell him about this specific character named Hero. And it's all very cheesy, because it is about a 5-year-old, because he was 5, and I wanted him to look at somebody, and see himself in a comic book, right? So the story itself is a 5-year-old monster hunter, and he's battling very specific monsters. It's not just like a monster that I'm coming up with out of the blue, although that is happening a little bit more of now. But he's battling mythical American monsters, and he has to find out why. Like, what are these guys doing here, and what is this about? And you get to follow along with the story of him and his 2 mentors, and his 2 mentors are a pair of brothers that can't agree on anything, like any two brothers. You have one brother that is like gung ho and just, he's just raw and wants to do things. Kind of like, there's food, I'm gonna go eat it. And then there's the other brother that's more like, you have to plan everything in your life. You can't just walk into this danger. You have to have a plan B, an exit strategy. So he's trying to listen to both of these extremes while he's battling these monsters as well. So that's the story of 5-year-old monster hunter.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about the character that we see here in the image. It looks like almost like a cloaked character with a skull mask. Who is this?
So that is a special cover that my friend Ryan Tumaliwan did for me, and that was the homage to Spawn. So it's very reminiscent of that Spawn cover.
Yeah, nice.
The character himself is that is our main protagonist. That is Hero. As Hero, the kid's name is Ike, and he becomes Hero like as an alter ego. Think of Shazam.
Shazam.
That was a big influence in how all of this got started. We sat down and watched Shazam one day, and I mean, I tell you, his eyes were just this big, and he was like, "Dad, did you know that he was a kid?" And I was like, "Yes, buddy. That's the whole reason we're watching this, And so the 5-year-old becomes this guy here, and his name is Hero. And the reason why his name is Hero is there's a lot of backstory to it, but basically it's a 5-year-old naming all of these things. So we have a lot of 5-year-old humor at the expense of a 5-year-old sometimes, and a lot of the time it's jokes that a 5-year-old understands. There's going to be some fart jokes here and there just because it's a 5-year-old. But all in all, my son and I have a lot of fun. Both writing and coming up with these things and designs and everything. So a lot of what you see is heavily influenced by my 5-year-old, now 7-year-old, who is working with me on a day-to-day basis with this stuff.
Fantastic. And Paul, Rabbit, do you have any questions for Edgar?
I actually saw you on one of the first streams that I saw with Ink Marketing right before I let out my first book. So I want to say thank you for that, first of all. But I mean, this is the 4th book, is that right? Third or fourth book?
Yeah. So the Kickstarter, the campaign that is going on right now through March 7th is the second campaign that will introduce issues 4, 5, and 6. So I'm doing 3 at a time. Yeah.
Oh wow!
And what is your son's favorite character? I mean, besides the main one, of course.
The monsters. I mean, I think both he and I are partial to the monsters, and we both came up with the idea of Tagarik, who is the main big bad. He's the villain,
right?
And that's actually good segue into
one
of the things that we're doing is this giant figure. And this is a roto vinyl figure, 11 points of articulation, 8 inches tall. I mean, he's somehow bigger than my giant head. And this is Tagarik, and the idea behind him is what drives both my son and I, because we are influenced by a lot of things, right? And it may sound like we're all over the place, but the main reason why we love this so much is because we came up with a reason for these monsters that are, you've seen them and heard them from these lore where they're not 30 feet tall. They're not going to destroy a city all on their own. Right. And we didn't want to just do the cheesy, like, oh, he has a grow ray or they eat some special vegetable. Right. We wanted to have a more like concrete reason why, how these things are going to destroy cities. And one of the things that he came up with was, why can't they be like my Power Rangers, right? And I was like, oh, yeah, like Power Rangers in reverse or Voltron in reverse, right? He had this, he has this giant Megazord, and he's like, I wanted to do this. And after that, we're like, oh, that's perfect, because now this guy is made up of 5 or 6 monsters, and that's how they get big. It's not just like one guy deciding,
That's
cool.
fantastic.
which I respect because it's out there, right? But I didn't want to like follow in that footstep. So in this case, they get together as a group and they grow, and that's what really like we're really into the mega monsters because it's a completely new design that we get to come up with, but using the monsters that you know and love, or that you know and fear in this case, from American lore.
And Manny, do you have any questions?
I do. I have a quick question.
Yeah.
You say your Kickstarter is you're doing it by 3 issues.
Yeah.
Is one of the tiers a way? Is there a way to get the first 3 issues through this Kickstarter, or is there a way to get them through their website or something like that?
So the answer is yes to both.
Okay.
We do have physical and digital issues on our website, as
Okay.
well as the campaign. The campaign, I'm actually doing something extra special. We're putting out the first 6 issues on digital for $7, and you can't beat that because it's.
I'm gonna get that.
If you think about it, it's well over 100 pages worth of reading in this full color, beautiful art. I basically am curating the look from the very get-go. So if you look there, I write the script. I do a very rough layout that I hand over to my interiors artist that is much better at all of this. But I do these very rough layouts for the interiors, and then they do their magic and work on it. But I'm also very, very much involved in, not just the layouts, but also the color, because there's color theory thrown into all of this. I want you to be in the mood, right? In the right mindset for what you're reading. And color plays a huge part in that for me. And my colorist, Miguel Gaton, is just amazing. I hardly have to do much controlling these days, so he makes my job a lot easier.
Yeah.
And any other creators you'd like to shout out? Like I know you mentioned a couple of creators.
So I have two interior artists. I have Jezreel Rojales, who did issues 1 and 2. And then I have Daniel Caval, who joined in a little bit late on issue 3. And he's doing 3 and 4. And we're gonna kind of toss back and forth between the two guys to speed up the process a little bit.
Nice.
Just because of the way it goes down, right? I'm wanting to speed up my process as much as possible, and in order to pump out, 1 issue every 2 months, which is a fairly relaxed schedule in the grand scheme of things. And I say that because I've worked for, I worked on the Power Rangers comic, for instance, and that was 3 comics a month, and that pace was just beyond nuts. Aside from my other responsibilities there, but the every 2 months is really all on my budget right now, because it has to be. The campaign is great because it gets the word out, and it helps me out. So thank you guys for helping me spread the word. But all of that stuff is basically the speed right now is all up to my budget and what I can afford to put out on that timeline. So
yeah. And how do you find the difference between your last project and this one? Do you find it's easier now that you've already set the foundation for these characters?
I do, actually. We got into a really good flow. I did have to retool a little bit because the first 3 issues, I think I threw out so much information because of the way that it was on purpose, right? When I wrote the first 7 issues, it was supposed to be a short, and it was 7 issues and done. And once I put out the first 3 and had some beta readers come back, unfortunately, it was in the middle of the campaign, but they came back and were like, dude, there's a lot of information in here, and at the same time, there's not enough. So basically, I retooled a little bit, and those next 4 issues that were supposed to finish out the story are now spread out into, I think it pulled it out 8 more issues,
wow.
Just to be able to tell the story the way that it's meant to be told. not pack one issue into like 30 pages and another one into 20. I wanted to cut the stories into smaller chunks. So
yeah, no, fair enough. Rabbit, do you have any questions?
So these little figures that you have, are you gonna make more figures of each of the characters? Because I've only saw one on the campaign. Is that right?
No, actually, there's a total of four. There's
Four. Okay.
So there's this big guy that
Yeah.
you're seeing on screen
Yeah.
there, and then I'm also doing to that guy's scale. I'm also doing these little guys that are the minis.
Right.
cool.
That's our main character hero, and then this is one of the main villains, the Beast of Busco, and they're done in a very recognizable style, I think, like little people.
Right.
We're calling them mini monsters, but basically it's this is the scale for them to like grow, right? So this
Right.
little guy, like 6 of this little guy, would make the big the big bad monster that does destroy your city.
That is great. That really is.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Thank
Manny, do you
you.
have any questions?
I have a question. It's not necessarily about the project, but did you grew up in the States, or did you grew up somewhere outside of the States?
Partially outside of the States. I grew up in Mexico City.
Okay.
And
Wow.
moved, we migrated to the US at a very young age, but I basically, I was there every summer, I was there every winter, so I was very fortunate enough to have that opportunity to basically go back and forth. But we're doing a lot of, we're putting in a lot of my background, a lot of my culture into everything you see, but I'm trying to make it so it's subtle, and I'm not like shoving Aztec or Mayan or any other culture down your throat. It's just like, hey, it's a nice little flourish to have in there, but you can still enjoy it even if you're Egyptian or Taiwanese. There's nothing polarizing about the design, I think, at this point.
Oh, I
That's
mean,
cool.
technically it's on the same continent, so it's not that hard to walk across the border.
Still American, yeah.
Yeah, same continent.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool.
Tell us a bit about this project here, the podcast sponsorship exchange.
Yeah, so we actually reached out to a bunch of podcasts, and it's basically as in exchange for you guys posting and having me on the show and everything else, we do a special for your viewers, right? Where it's kind of like getting a coupon. Your viewers get a date and time when they can go on the Kickstarter, and basically it's like an early bird pricing, but in the middle of the campaign, so it can come at any moment, right? And in this case, this Togaric that we're showing on the screen is normally an $80 figure all on his own. That's what he retails for. In this case, we're doing them for $40, and we're also including some digital comics that go along with it. Some very cool stuff. I think it's over 100 pages in the Mac and Trouble series. There's 2 books from Mac and Trouble that are a great fun read. There's also another one from you were just doing your book review on Morgan Quaid. Morgan actually threw in one of his books to help out the campaign. So one of our next sales is going to include one of Morgan's books. And basically what we're doing is 2 of these little minifigures. Normally they're $15 a piece with the digital comics. We're going to be doing 2 of those plus the digital comics, and we're going to throw in a bunch of stuff for $25. So it's a really great sale. I think altogether it's like a $55 package for $25. We're throwing a bunch of stuff in there just to make sure that we're giving something back to the folks that helped us, not only the first go around but also for this one.
Nice. Wow.
That's cool.
That is so cool. Yeah, and congratulations, you sold out, which is a good sign.
Yeah. The first batch of those sale figures went very quickly. I think it was like the first 24 or 30 hours or so. Those were sold out, which is great. Yeah, it was a nice first big push in the campaign.
That's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. So, Edgar, just tell us a bit about yourself. So, where did your comic book journey begin when you actually picked up your first comic book, and why was it so
Yeah.
instrumental?
So for me, maybe I was maybe 8 or 9 years old when I started, like in earnest, like drawing and doing stuff for myself. But I always had the dream, even in high school, right? I was drawing with a buddy of mine, actually a couple buddies of mine. We created a comic, and it never went anywhere. It was just kind of one of those like, I draw cool pictures, and there was no story, there was nothing. So I just kind of I wrapped it up. I thought, this is not something that I'm gonna, be doing too much of anymore. And then in comes my professional career, where I started out as a toy designer, and I moved my way up to design manager, and then Saban reached out and was like, "Hey, would you want to become a product manager and handle these parts of the business?" And I was like, well, "Yeah, sweet, let's do it." So they trusted me with their publishing, and it was like publishing and digital apps and health and beauty and a couple different categories. But when I got there, we basically retooled, and we went from basically the equivalent of the same campiness that was in the original 90s TV show. That was on the page for what they were doing beforehand, and we retooled. We moved away from that a little bit and said, what is it that the super fans remember this show? Like, what is it that they look back on and think that they remember from this show? And that's what was written down on the page. And I had I magoo my way into a lot of things. I had a phenomenal writer in Kyle Higgins. Henry Prasetya was the interiors artist. So I walked right into this like rainbow, and just walked right across it. And basically we sold over 1 million units in the first, I believe it was in the first 4 months of release. And that was, I mean, that was unheard of for anything that we had done in publishing to date. So, I was very, very fortunate enough to step into that situation with a great team and a great company behind us too, which was Boom. They backed, all along the way. So it made my job a lot easier. And that's where I really, cut my teeth and like really got into what is a comic, and how do you handle it, right? So I handled it from the point of view that you guys were talking about earlier. Rabbit was mentioning, they have a style guide, and that was my job. I was the living, breathing style guide police. My job was to say, no, you can't put 4 diamonds across their chest just because it looks cooler. They have to have, you have to do this XYZ, and making sure that voice was, their voice was basically reminding you of what the 90s show was, without like still keeping it modern, but without going outside of those bounds, because there are certain things that Mr. Saban did not want to deviate from, and Rabbit was right on the money. You don't bend the knee to anybody. That does not happen. And we did a couple crossovers. If you look at the DC stuff that we did, it was a DC crossover, and it wasn't the Power Rangers becoming any different. It was basically, you are coming into my world, and this is my sandbox, and you're going to follow our rules, and that's how it went down. It wasn't like, I mean, there were some, there were a little bit of give and take on both ends, but it was basically like, we don't care if you're DC, these are characters that are beloved, and we're not going to change them because, it would be cool for Brainiac to do XYZ, right? Like, like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. It's cool.
So yeah, that's a roundabout way of, my intro to comics was, drawing as a kid, and then it evolved career wise. I stepped in it, I stepped right into this role of curating the comics from that point of view of making sure that everything was on brand.
Yep. Wow, what a story. Very impressive.
Thank you.
Mind's blown. But guys, Manny, you got any more questions for Edgar?
I'm good. I just wish him success, man. A lot of success.
Thank you, man.
Yeah,
Appreciate
same.
it.
And
Good
you,
luck.
Rabbit?
Hopefully everything keeps going the way it's going, and you get up there and funded. It looks great, and like I said, I've seen you and been a fan for a while.
All right, thank you so much, man. I appreciate that, and same,
No.
Same to you, because I actually spoke to Kevin about about your first book, the PTSD. I'm a fan, so
Awesome.
great
Thank
stuff,
you.
man. Keep it up.
Cool.
Yeah, and like, well, where else can we find you, Edgar? I know we've got your Kickstarter right here on the screen below, but where else can we find you?
Yeah, on social media, across the board, any of the social media is at Amerikaiju Comic, and it's basically at amerikaijucomic.com for the website, and Amerikaiju Comic for basically all the TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. It's all the same across the board.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us on our very first episode of Think Indie podcast. But again, we wish you the utmost success, and we'd love to see you again at some point. Love to have you.
Yeah, I
back
love
on
it. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
No doubt.
All right, guys, I'll be wrapping up on behalf of myself, Dodgy, as well as Manny and Rabbit. See you all next time.
Yeah, man.
Thank you. We hope you've enjoyed this Comic Crusaders production. For real-time news on all things pop culture, please feel free to follow us on social media. For articles, original content, merchandise, and more, please go to www.comiccrusaders.shop. Also follow along with all of the websites of the Comic Crusaders family. As always, if you like this content, please click like and subscribe to the Comic Crusaders YouTube channel.